Hi, welcome to the live stream today. Doing it a little bit different. Going live from my personal studio. Let me see if I can add this phone too. Okay, that didn't work. So here we are. We're using my personal studio at home today. I'm going to be painting a magnolia blossom for y'all. I'm going to use acrylics, which is not something that I usually use. I'm more of a oil painter by nature, but I'm going to do this today to show y'all something a little bit different. So I've already prepped my canvas here. It's got a base coat on it. Now I am picking out some colors. I'm going to be doing a lot of whites and maybe some light browns and blues. I want to pull the grays of a more green blue color today for the grays instead of a straight up black gray. And I found a picture of a magnolia blossom that I love on the internet, so I'm going to be using that as my base. Making sure I don't have a black down here. Okay. So I came in after I primed the canvas and I drew my magnolia blossom. I don't know if you can see that, but I drew the blossom on to the canvas for starters. And I'm just going to give it like a light background color right now. And then I'm going to come back on top of it with the actual white for the magnolia blossoms. And magnolias are super white. They have a really whites, which not a lot of paintings do. I'm just giving my canvas a little bit of a wet spray to it and making sure that I use a lot of water. So I'm going to do the greens in the background because magnolia trees are very dense just by nature. So I'm going to just give it a light wash with the green. I like to add water to my acrylics because they dry super fast. And being an oil painter, that's not something that I like. I like for things to stay wet longer. So I'm just going to brush on this sap green color in the background. I always tell my classes when I'm teaching that you want to start like you would as if you were putting on clothes. You don't put on your undergarments outside of your clothes. You put them on first. So start with the background and come forward because you want to paint on top and not underneath something. So having this paint really wet helps me to just it's almost like a light watercolor going on there. And I'm mixing the sap green with a little bit of the olive green. And yes, my water's running through there. That's okay. Once you get your background painted on there and you do your sides and edges, you'll be able to come back through and add different tones in it. The picture that I picked out to draw from the internet, you can't really see the leaves because it's just close up on the blossom. So we're just going to add darks and lights in there to give the illusion of leaves. People are going to see what they're supposed to see. I always tell people that too in my classes, like when they're don't stress out trying to paint the feet or the leaves or anything because people are going to see it because it's supposed to be there. They're not expecting this magnolia blossom to be on the side of a building. They're expecting it to be on top of leaves. So you want to come around too and get your sides really good. I always tell people to be sure and get their edges. I love using these gallery frames because they're thick and you don't have to frame them. There's no need to, actually. They're a little more expensive, but they're really pretty on the wall. So we're going to give it just almost a watercolor look. Brush it all the way around with the green. Really, the more water you add to it, the thinner it is and more sheer. You can come back and do it thicker later if you want to. You could even do the sides an entirely different color if you wanted to. A black or a brown, almost to make it look like it's standing on a frame. Be sure that you have your brush strokes going in the same direction. You don't want to create confusion when people look at it. You want them to see it just like it is, up and down. Even though I do this on the edges to get the edges, I still come back and smooth it over with the up and down strokes. Believe me, you can create confusion with brush strokes. And do this last one here. I am dipping my brush in the water continuously. It's been a long time since I've painted with acrylics. It's a whole different feel. All right, so now that I've got that smooth green edge all the way around, now we're going to come back to the front. And I'm going to fill in around the edges of the flower with the darker part of the green, because that will give it depth. Anywhere that something is laying on top of something else, if you use a darker color, you're going to create a shadowy, like a depth with the shadow. So I'm just lightly swiping. Again, I have a really wet brush. I want it to have more of a washed look than a thick paint look on this. Just on the background, I'm going to do the actual flower, I think, thick, because I like texture. So if you do the darker lines around the edges of your flower, you're going to give yourself that shadow in there. And don't worry about getting into your lines or not being straight. I think that's one thing that makes it look worse when people paint the background last, because they're too strict with themselves, laying the background down because they don't want to get on top of their other painting. So if you start with the background first, you have more play. And it doesn't matter if I'm not directly in the lines, because I'm going to come back and lay the flower on top of the background. That was my phone. Sorry. All right. So just coming around the sky. I don't know what it is about. I mean, I'm from Magnolia, Arkansas, so I grew up seeing magnolias everywhere. But I love painting magnolias. There's just something about them. They're very southern to me. They remind me of my grandmother, Marianne. and my dad, my pop. They remind me of them. Okay, so for now, that's going to be my background. I may come back and add to it later when I'm done. I changed my mind. I'm putting a little olive in there. One thing that I love about painting with oils is that I can continuously go over things because they're not dry yet. So that's different for me with these acrylics. I have to just hit it and move on. And then if I want to come back and change it, I have to paint over it instead of just being able to blend it right in. So that's a little bit different to me. Okay, so there's my background. Now we're going to start on the flower. I'm going to make sure I get all the green out of my brush. Actually, I'll probably just switch brushes. So the flower has very light and very gray areas. I'm not going to use a gray per se as in black today. I think I'm going to use more of a, well, I think I'm going to use more of a burnt umber for my black areas. So we want to start with water. I'm going to go one petal at a time to really get this in. And I'm going to start with the petals in the background and then come to the petals in the foreground. So I'm going to start by just laying the white down. And you can see that as I do it over the edges of the leaves, it sharpens that up. So I'm just painting around this first leaf on the back side. In the middle of the flower, there's these little, I don't remember what you would call those, tendrils, I don't remember, but the middle part of the flower. I'm actually going to use a second brush for my darker colors, my shades. Again, be sure that you're keeping your brushes wet. This is a jump too because I used to only paint lives with chalk paint when I was at my other job, and now I've been using so many different mediums. So I'm just putting a little bit of burnt umber in there, and I'm going to create a darker area here in the middle where the flower cups inside, because that's going to be shaded, and around where these little tentacles are, whatever they're called. I can't remember. And I think it's titanium. I think I want to use a really dark blue for my darker areas. It's like an ultramarine. Yep, ultramarine blue. So I'm going to mix that ultramarine with some of this burnt umber to create my shade, my gray shadowy. I'm going to come up on this side right here. That's really dark. I might thin that out just a little bit. So I'll kind of clean my brush off and I'm wiping some of it down, making it a little more watery. So it's not quite as stark. And I'm going to go ahead and use this in my other cracks and shadows while I have it wet here. Around the back sides of some of these leaves. Come in with my white right here. One thing I don't like about painting with acrylics that I like about painting with oils is you have to move quicker to get the blending because the paint dries so much faster. And with oils, you don't have to move as quick. But also with oils, you can muddy up a painting really fast if you're not careful. You can't just keep going over and over. It's just going to turn into mud. So I used that and blended it down in, and I like that now that I added the white on top of it and created more of a blend. It's just ultramarine blue, burnt umber, and white and water, giving us our gray today. Let's see, we can use it back here on this one. There we go. The inside of this guy. I'm just coming back with that wet white over our gray area just to blend it in. So when you're painting something like this, and people are always, they get so frustrated because they can't paint the flower. So what I tell people all the time is quit thinking about it as a flower and start looking at it as colors and shapes. And if you just paint what you see, I even tell people to turn their painting upside down. And you're like, okay, there's a black line here and a white line there and a gray blob there. Paint the shapes and it will come together as a full picture in the end. Whenever, especially like on my pet portraits, when I'm teaching that class and people are like, oh, I can't paint a nose. Well, turn the painting around, turn your picture for reference around, and don't paint a nose. Paint black here, pink there. And I promise you, when you turn it back around, it's going to look so good. I also tell people to walk away and look at it from a distance because what you're looking at super close from far away looks really good. I do that too when people have trouble painting like pelican feet and stuff. And I'm like, it doesn't, no, everybody that looks at that pelican is going to assume that what's underneath it is feet, and that's what they're going to see. It doesn't necessarily have to look like little feet and toes. They're going to see whatever they're supposed to see. So I'm trying to get all my darker areas now so that I can come back with my bright whites. And as you paint and you come back on top of that green, it really starts to pop off too. And if you don't like it, you can always cover it back up and start over. No pressure. Again, I'm swapping back and forth here. From one brush to the other. Keep adding water to it to keep it flowing. I feel like once I get the basis down, I'm going to come back with a palette knife and really give it some chunky texture. I love texture. The only bad thing about doing this at home is I don't have anybody to sit back and tell me if y'all have any questions. So I will go back and answer them when I'm done. Let's see. I'm really trying to add that titanium white in just to connect it all together, and so I can see where I need to go from here. I'm going to come back in and add a little shadow in here. Don't be afraid of color. Okay, it's just coming together. Phone. All right. So that covers the basis now. And I feel like I have all this shading in. So now I'm going to come back with just the really white and paint over the areas and blend them together before I work on that middle piece. They're not tentacles. I want to say they're tendrils or something. I can't remember the scientific word for it. If anybody knows, you can let me know. I don't know why it's escaped me today. So let's see. All right. It must be warmer outside today because I feel a little warm. Okay, I'm going to do these little tingement things so that we can see what we're looking at and bring it all together. These are going to have some yellow, some cream. So just like with a flower, you want to paint the part that's going to be behind it first. So these top ones are behind it, and then the next layer comes up on top of it, and the next layer on top of that. So you want to build up to what you're painting so that you don't, it's easier to lay on top of, and it looks more realistic than to lay underneath something in the reverse order. If that makes sense. That makes no sense probably. But you want to build up on top of things and not try to paint things in reverse. Just like if you were getting dressed, what do you put on first? The part that's underneath. We'll come back and put some dark in there in a minute to give it even more depth. So then these down here are a little more just creamy, not quite as yellow. So I'm going to wash some of that yellow off my brush and go with this cream color. Which if you didn't have a cream color, you could get it with just a tiny, tiny bit of raw umber. And with the white will give you that. And I mean tiny when I say tiny. So then we're going to come back on top with these little guys. Tendrils. Is that the word? That sounds more like it. Tendril. And then there are actually some that are laying down. So we're going to come back this way with them. The ones right here are hidden by the leaf. not leaf, petal. And then these were kind of laid out. Now I'm going to add some white into the creamier ones to help them stand out more. I'm using a really flat brush that I can just whip with. And you want to pull up or pull out. You don't want to pull in. When you're creating the illusion of things laying down, you don't want to pull in, you want to pull out. Your brush strokes, they matter. They're very important. Whichever brush strokes you use will cause the eye to go in that direction. So you want the eyes to go like this, and you don't want them to go off the page or to look chaotic in the center. You want to bring the eyes just really softly with the way the natural pattern of it is. Be organic with your brush strokes and paint. It really will take your painting from 2D or 1D to 2D or 3D really quickly if you use a pattern of strokes that go in the same direction that the plant actually grows or the fur moves, or our fur grows out. It doesn't grow in. I get tongue twisted. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. I'm going to get a tiny bit of pink to put into the center where those are growing out. Well, maybe. There it is. Just a little bit. There. So I mixed a little bit of that ultramarine blue with this crimson, and I'm using it like a deep, deep purple here to create this base for these little tendrils and where they lay down and sit. And then I'm also going to use it, maybe a little bit of a lighter version of it, for my shadowy areas in between the tendrils. Again, I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm just going to create some lines in here. And they aren't perfect. They're just little zigzags and lines. They give the illusion of depth. Where you see dark, you see depth. Again, you want to keep your brush wet so that it flows. And when that's good and dry, I'm going to come back with some of the bright white and create the highlights on top of it. Of course, that is a part that you want to be dry. And give some little depth up here too. In the yellower, more yellow. I'm sure that was wrong. Yellower is not a word. All right, so I'm going to leave that alone for a minute, let it dry, and then I'm going to come back with the bright white to cause it to pop off and show the highlights better. I'm going to get some bright white now on a skinny brush and create some harsh lines for the flower around the tips, the edges of the petals that are really going to separate them, help them to curve off the page and not be so flat. So this would be where your highlights are. I'm really thinking about using a palette knife to give this guy some good texture. I feel it in my heart is what I want to do. Maybe use some of this. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, I like that. So this is a palette knife, and I'm just dipping it in this medium. And it's kind of doing the highlighting and the shadows for me because of the darker underneath. Like the darker showing through where I'm using the palette knife. When you use a palette knife, you want to use it flat and just lightly pull across your painting for the area you want. Yeah, I like that. Sometimes you just gotta mess around until you find what you like. And like, I mean, sometimes I will get so frustrated that I just leave it alone and come back later and work on it again. Because sometimes it takes a while to find what you want to do or how you like it, or you just can't get it right. But if you walk away and come back later, you will have a whole new perspective on everything. So just like the brush strokes with the palette knife, you'll see that I'm moving in the shape of the petal and not just pulling all crazy side to side diagonals, moving actually with how I want your eyes to look when you look at the petal. Because again, that's important. If you want people to see what you're painting, you're going to have to paint it in the same way it would be in the wild. I'm not going to be afraid to get up close to my little centerpiece here because I'm going to do this on that too a little bit to pop it off. All right, let me mix some of this cream color into this. I need a little bit more. Okay, I'm liking that. Fill a little bit more of that yellow, like a deeper. There we go. I like that. Mixing some of that ultramarine in with this yellow. Give a little bit of green here. The stuff dries so fast. I'm not used to that. So a little bit of this yellow in with this ultramarine blue to get a deep, deep green here. I'm just giving this base here a little bit of this deep green. Don't be afraid of color. Nothing that you look at is just plain white or plain black. There's always some color mixed in there. I have people message me all the time that are in the middle of painting something and they're stuck or they're wanting to make something come to life. And so we just talk about what other colors are in there that can really bring it out. Colors that maybe you don't see with your, just right off the bat. But if you start to look and pick it apart, you're going to see all of those beautiful colors in there. Nice. So there's just a few little spots that I want to sharpen up so that you can see them better. And I think I'm going to use this really dark umber and ultramarine blue again. And a really thin brush and really a lot of water to help it smooth. Not straight, like just harsh outlines, but just some spaces to separate one leaf from the other. Or one petal from the other. Yeah, I like that. All right. There's our colorful magnolia. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me see. Not sure who I'm going to have on next week, but we'll be on Wednesday. And then back again on Friday. I'm hoping I've had some issues getting a good feed going up there. Like it seems to be blurry. So I'm hoping to try and get that fixed soon, figure out what's causing that. I hope today's wasn't blurry. I'm just using this thin brush to add a little bit of texture up here to these things. All right, thanks for joining. Here is our acrylic magnolia for the day with lots of texture. And I hope you enjoyed it. And y'all have a great weekend. Bye.